for now, I have with me Harshvardhan Roongta of Roongta Securities to talk to us about curating that ideal Diwali portfolio and ensuring that there aren't any constituents that actually drag the overall return generation, prospects of the portfolio. Harsh, as always, it's a pleasure having you with us on the Money Show. Very often we are told that when you invest in a mutual fund, you have to do so keeping in mind the long term. You can't have a mutual fund investment or an SIP for 1 year or 2 years because that is not prudent investment practices. I mean, in the last 2 years, we have seen what the small cap mutual funds have done. Virtually all of them are in the negative. And hence we say, yes, if you're doing an SIP, you have to do it in the long term. But let's say if I'm investing for 5 years, 7 years, 8 years, how often am I supposed to give my portfolio a relook? Because many a times our SIPs are just going on and we do tend to ignore the same.
So, well, Mobina, we're talking about a review of a portfolio. So, well, I would suggest that you would review your portfolio once in 2 years. So, when we talk about review, it does not mean that you're supposed to book your profits. The review process is simply to evaluate whether the schemes that you are invested in, how are they performing? Is it first in line with your expectation? The second would be what they are doing in relation to the benchmark which they are, tagged to. So, have they outperformed the benchmark? So, if the markets are going up, they're supposed to give me a return which is better than benchmark. If if the markets are going down, they're supposed to fall lesser than the benchmark. So, that's how you will evaluate on the second part. The third is you will try and evaluate how they're doing in comparison to the other schemes in the same category. So, you need to evaluate whether the scheme that I am investing into, are they in line with whatever they're supposed to do. If they're not doing well, then you may consider moving to another scheme. Does not mean that if you've made certain amount of profits, you try and look to book that profit. So yeah, review process, you would need to make an attempt to do this once in 2 years. If not, then at least make sure that you're at least tracking what you're doing and you don't stop your investments because you felt something else. So SIP on an average, we've seen that they don't last beyond 3 years or 5 years. Though the intent is good, they start off with long term in mind, but for whatever reasons, I mean 3 years and 5 years, you see the SIPs closing down.
Okay, so basically discipline, I think that as well is something that Harsh is reiterating. So Harsh, you mentioned one very simple parameter, and that is your portfolio, this particular fund that you have in your portfolio should be outperforming the benchmark. And if in case, the benchmark is falling, as we have seen in the last 2 years, it should not fall as much as it has, in the case of the benchmark. That's one very simple parameter. Is there anything else that should come up as a warning sign that, okay, maybe this fund needs to be given a relook?
So yeah, there are a couple of things that you will want to keep a track of. So while we talk from a layman point of view, we're not talking about a professional who's associated with this industry. So as a layman, what you're supposed to simply do, as you're an investor who does not understand markets, who doesn't know how to track it, that is why you've entrusted your money into a fund to manage and to invest into equity markets for you. So in simple words, as I said, first is that you need to look as to what you are expecting out of it. So if you invest into equities with that expectation of 20% and your fund is not doing that, most likely it will not do that because 20% is a very high return, and in exceptional cases you will kind of get that. So moderate your expectation from the investment as well. Be realistic in your approach. So if an equity fund is expected to give you about 14 to 15% returns over long term, which is we have to stay invested in different market cycles and look through the entire market process for over 10 years, then we are expecting 14 to 15%. Now, if you start expecting 15% every year of your investment, it is not going to happen. Markets may give you negative returns over the next couple of years and then suddenly give you a bumper profit. And then on an average, you're looking to get that kind of returns. So most importantly, as an hygiene, element, I would suggest that investors should very carefully understand the functioning of a product. Now, for instance, if you've seen 3 years of negative returns in equities, you don't go back to your advisor or the fund house and you tell them that isse better to FD tha, I would have got 8% or 7% for 3 years. Now that you add up into your potential loss. No, that is not how it functions. So be realistic with your approach. In this Diwali, the Nayi Shuruaat that we're talking about is that be realistic with the investments, understand how an investment functions, and so that you can live with it all throughout its cycles.